Sometimes, fate places us in situations where quick decisions can mean the difference between life and death. Imagine a quiet rest stop, the kind of place where the silence of the night seems to offer a brief respite from the worries of the day. But what if behind this facade of calm, a dark danger was lurking? William Johnson, a war veteran used to dealing with the worst of humanity, stops his truck at an ordinary gas station. He's just trying to rest. However, when he locks eyes with a young girl, he realizes that something is terribly wrong. A simple silent gesture, a number scribbled on a bracelet, sparks suspicion that plunges him into a night of tension, danger, and perhaps redemption. In this story, where trust could mean the end of everything and every second counts, you'll be taken to the edge. What would you do if you were in William's shoes? Would you be willing to risk everything to save a life you don't even know? If this introduction grabbed your attention, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss a single detail of this tension-filled, twisty story. Keep watching and discover how this electrifying plot unfolds. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange that blended into the worn asphalt of the road. The gas station, one of those forgotten by time, seemed like the perfect place for a break after hours of driving. William Johnson, a man nearing 50, a military veteran with invisible scars, parked his heavy truck. He stepped out slowly, his body tired, but his eyes as sharp as ever. As he entered the diner, he was greeted by a familiar smell of stale coffee and fried food. There were only a few people inside, all absorbed in their own routines, except for one figure that caught his attention. Sitting at a corner table was a white man with graying hair, smiling as he spoke with a young black girl. The girl, no more than 10 years old, seemed out of place in that setting. Her body was tense, her small hands clutched a napkin, and though her eyes were fixed on the man, William noticed something in her expression. It was as if she wanted to be anywhere but there. The man, on the other hand, seemed overly friendly, gesturing animatedly, like someone trying to convince rather than simply converse. William grabbed his coffee and sat at a table close enough to observe discreetly, but not too close to appear suspicious. His military instincts were on high alert, a feeling in his gut telling him something was wrong. Maybe it's just paranoia, he thought as he took a sip of the bitter coffee. Still, he couldn't take his eyes off the pair. He found himself watching the small details, the girl's rigid posture, the man's forced smile, the quick glances around. Something was definitely off. As William tried to rationalize his thoughts, the girl got up to go to the restroom. When she passed him, their eyes met for a brief moment. It was quick, but in that second, William felt something. A silent plea for help. As she walked by, she dropped a bracelet that softly wrapped around the foot of William's table. He picked it up, and as he turned to return it, noticed something written on the back, a phone number, scribbled almost imperceptibly. William's heart began to race. William stared at the bracelet for a few seconds, the handwritten phone number catching his attention. A flood of thoughts hit him. What if I'm misinterpreting this? What if it's just a misunderstanding? But something inside him, perhaps the years of military training or the instincts sharpened by time, told him it wasn't a coincidence. He glanced over at the man, who was now casually waiting for the girl to return, sipping on a soda. The knot in William's stomach tightened. He knew he had to do something, but what? When the girl returned, she seemed even more withdrawn, walking with short, hesitant steps. She sat down quickly, and the man leaned in, saying something William couldn't hear. The air around them felt heavier. William stood up slowly and walked to the counter to get another cup of coffee, trying to think about his next move. He could confront the man directly, but the risk of being wrong kept him cautious. And what if the situation was worse than he imagined? If his suspicions were correct, every second mattered. Back at his table, William pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed the number from the bracelet. Each tap on the screen seemed to echo in his mind, increasing the tension. When the phone started ringing, his breathing grew heavier. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. A trembling female voice answered, "Hello? Who is this?" William asked, trying to keep his voice steady. On the other end, the woman responded in almost a whisper, "My name is Lisa, my daughter. She was taken." William's heart sank. That little girl was her daughter. Before William could ask any more questions, the call was abruptly cut off. He looked at the phone in shock. What he feared was being confirmed, but now he was on his own. He looked over toward the pair's table, and the man was getting up, calmly leading the girl out of the diner with unsettling ease. The window of opportunity was closing. William knew he couldn't just leave it at that. He got up quickly and followed them outside, keeping a safe distance as he decided what to do next. The air outside was thick, the day's heat still lingering as William kept his distance, watching the man open the car door for the girl. She got in without protest, but William noticed the way her shoulders were hunched, as if she were carrying an invisible weight. The veteran felt a lump in his throat as he watched the man smile calmly as he started the car. Every survival instinct he had learned in war zones began to pulse inside him. This isn't a coincidence, he thought. His fingers itched to grab the phone again, but he knew he couldn't draw attention. They started pulling out of the parking lot, and William, determined, ran back to his truck. He had to follow them. Behind the wheel of his truck, William kept a calculated distance, watching every move the car in front made. The road was getting emptier as night approached, and the shadows stretched, creating an even more unsettling atmosphere. He tried calling the police again, but once more, the call dropped. It was as if fate was working against him. He cursed under his breath, sweat trickling down his forehead, not from the heat, but from the growing pressure of the situation. What if he lost sight of the car? What if something worse happened before he could intervene? As he followed the car, William couldn't help but think about how composed the man seemed. There were no obvious signs of nervousness, no rush. It was almost as if he knew he was in control, which only made William feel more uneasy. He saw the car turn onto a narrow, deserted side road, flanked by tall trees that formed a dark tunnel. His stomach tightened. This was getting more suspicious by the minute. He turned off the truck's headlights, fearing he might be noticed. Every move had to be precise now, with no room for error. Time seemed to stretch as William continued to follow the car, what felt like an eternity passing. His mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. He knew he couldn't confront the man alone. There was something about him, the way everything was being orchestrated, that made William suspect he wasn't dealing with an amateur. "This is bigger than I thought," he reflected, remembering the woman's voice on the phone, the urgency in the few words he'd heard. The car's brake lights flashed ahead as they pulled over into a dark area, with no buildings or streetlights, just the road surrounded by dense vegetation. William parked his truck at a safe distance, his mind racing with the possible threats lurking in the shadows. Night fell oppressively, wrapping the road in an almost tangible darkness. The tall trees around, lined up like silent sentinels, cast shadows that seemed to come alive with the wind's movement. William, now parked, turned off his truck's engine to avoid drawing attention. The only light came from the starry sky above and the dim headlights of the car ahead. He kept his eyes fixed on the scene, trying to catch any detail that might help him understand what was happening. The man, still confident and calculated, stepped out of the car with the girl at his side. She walked slowly, as if trying to disappear. William muttered to himself, "What's that bastard doing?" But deep down he knew it wasn't good. The surroundings were quiet, except for the occasional rustling of leaves. A sense of dread washed over William as he noticed something that had gone unnoticed before. There was another figure in the darkness. Moving between the trees, a shadow moved with an almost eerie fluidity, watching the pair like a predator lying in wait. William's heart began to race. "Shit, there's more than one," he whispered, and the realization hit him hard. This wasn't an isolated situation. It was a well-laid trap. William's hand trembled as he grabbed the binoculars from inside the truck. He needed a closer look, adjusting the focus, The scene came into sharp clarity through the lens. The older man, now standing next to the girl, kept a calculated expression, while the girl remained slumped, as if all hope had drained out of her. The second man, taller and more muscular, moved stealthily to the other side of the clearing, as if awaiting an order. William's stomach churned. The gears of a larger operation were starting to show. Damn, they're coordinated, he thought. Every move was calculated. He started thinking fast, his military mind assessing all the options. The tension grew with each passing second. Yet, there was no denying William was in a fragile position. He knew he couldn't confront these men alone, not without the certainty that help was on the way. But what would he do in the meantime? William knew he had to do something, and fast. He grabbed his phone and tried calling the police again. His sweaty hands made it difficult to handle the device, and his heart beat faster when the call finally connected. On the other end, the operator's voice echoed through the line. Emergency, how can I help you? I'm on Route 402 near the Oak Creek clearing. There's a kidnapping happening here. There's more than one victim. I need a squad car now, William whispered, glancing back at the movement ahead. Sir, please stay calm and don't interfere. The police are on their way. William looked back at the group ahead, his stomach turning. They're taking the girls. There's a van here. I can't wait. His words came faster, his voice betraying the urgency of the situation. Understood, sir. Keep your distance. Do not interfere until authorities arrive. William hung up, but he knew he couldn't just sit and watch. Seconds were ticking by, and he felt every second lost was a life in danger. He took a deep breath, trying to push back the fear gripping him. He knew he would have to act soon. The movement ahead made his heart stop for a moment. The older man opened the back door of a white van parked near the edge of the road. Inside, William saw a sight that made him stop breathing for an instant. There were more girls, at least 3, tied up and wide-eyed with fear. They were sitting on the van's floor, their wrists bound with plastic ties. The man treated them like merchandise, casting calculated glances, while the girl William had been following was pushed toward the van. The girl hesitated for a moment, looking back, and her eyes met William's from afar. There was a flicker of hope in her gaze, as if she knew he was there. In that moment, William knew he couldn't wait any longer. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his heart pounding, as he murmured to himself, I have to do something. I can't let them vanish. He knew the police were on their way, but he also knew that without immediate intervention, it might be too late for the girls. The veteran took a deep breath, feeling the weight. The night was warm, but the air carried the scent of damp earth, as if a storm was approaching. The leaves on the surrounding trees swayed gently, creating a soft sound, almost a whisper in the dark, as William carefully moved out of his truck. The cold metal of the door handle under his hand made him shiver. Outside, the silence was almost absolute, except for the faint chirping of insects. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if nature itself was waiting for something terrible to unfold. William observed the scene ahead with trained eyes. The 2 men were still focused on their task, unaware of his presence. The older man moved with a disturbing precision, while the taller one tossed rolls of duct tape and plastic bags carelessly, as if packing ordinary goods, not human lives. William's breathing was heavy and slow, and he could feel his heart pounding in his ears. Every sound seemed amplified by the darkness, even the soft rustling of his boots on the dry leaves below. He crouched behind a large tree, the strong scent of sap mixing with the damp night air. Sweat dripped down the side of his face, causing his shirt to cling to his body. The whole environment felt suffocating. William watched the glow of the headlights reflecting off the white van, like a ghost ready to take those girls away from any hope. Every second dragged on. The sound of the van doors closing echoed through the clearing like a death sentence. The tension built like heat in William's chest. He looked around, trying to hear any sound that might indicate the approach of police cars. But all he heard was the low whistle of the wind through the branches and the distant sound of a creek. making the silence feel even deeper. He knew time was running out. Across the clearing, the taller man checked the bound girls in the van one by one, his movements almost mechanical, as if he had done this countless times. The smell of diesel from the van mixed with the scent of wet earth, making the air heavy and suffocating. William's throat was dry, and the metallic taste of adrenaline filled his mouth. His hands trembled slightly, and he cursed under his breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Suddenly, in the distance, the sound of sirens cut through the night air, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing second. Blue and red lights began to flash along the distant road, creating flickers that danced between the trees. The men's expressions changed instantly. The older man, who had been in control until now, slammed the van doors shut as if that would lock the evidence away forever. The sharp sound of the doors closing was like a gunshot. The smell of exhaust fumes filled the air as the second man began running toward the dense part of the forest, his footsteps muffled by the dry leaves, but loud enough for William to follow. The veteran took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs as he prepared to act. William stood up, his heart pounding frantically, and shouted with all the force he could muster, "Stop! The police are on their way!" His voice echoed through the clearing, blending with the buzz of the night. He saw the older man turn sharply, his face filled with surprise and anger. The flashing police lights illuminated the man's sweaty face, highlighting his hardened features and the tight press of his lips in frustration. "Stay where you are," William shouted again, but the older man didn't obey. Instead, his hand quickly dove into his coat, and the metallic glint of a gun appeared in his grip. William held his breath for a moment, anticipating the smell of gunpowder, even though no shot had been fired yet. The air around them seemed frozen, dense like an invisible fog. "You're making a mistake, old man," the man yelled, his voice filled with barely contained rage. "If you move, you won't leave here alive." He pointed the gun directly at William, his eyes burning with a twisted determination. William's throat was dry, the tension squeezing his chest like a vice. He knew the man could fire at any second, and it would all end here. Their heavy breathing filled the air, and the scent of sweat, earth, and gunpowder dominated the scene. William kept his eyes fixed on the man, searching for a weakness, a hesitation, something he could use to his advantage. "It doesn't have to be this way," William said, his voice low but steady. "The police will handle this. Put the gun down and no one gets hurt." Each word seemed to slice through the silence like a knife, and he could feel the heat of the tension building between them. The next moment was a blur of action. The older man hesitated, but only for a split second. He spun as if to run, but William was faster. Driven by adrenaline and years of training, he lunged at the man, the sound of their bodies colliding echoing through the empty road. The impact was brutal, and they rolled across the damp ground, mud mixing with sweat and the scent of crushed leaves all around. William fought with everything he had, feeling the rough texture of the earth in his hands as he pinned the man to the ground. The smell of blood, mixed with sweat and dust, filled his nostrils as the man struggled, but William, driven by a sense of duty and urgency, twisted the man's arm behind his back. "Stay down," William shouted, his voice hoarse with effort, as the sound of sirens finally stopped around them. He could hear the officers approaching, their boots crunching the leaves on the ground. The man groaned in pain, but William didn't loosen his grip until the police reached them. "Police, don't move," the officers shouted as they quickly handcuffed the man. William, exhausted and covered in sweat and dirt, stepped back, watching the flashing lights and feeling a wave of relief wash over him. The smell of exhaust and damp earth still filled the air, but now there was a sense of closure, that the worst had passed. As William looked at the van, the police opened it, freeing the girls inside. He could see tears of relief and hear their soft sobs. The girl he had followed looked at him, and in that moment, without words, both understood the impact of the rescue. The heavy night air still surrounded them, but now there was a sense of hope lingering in it. The early morning hours advanced, and the sky began to lighten softly on the horizon, bringing with it a fresh air that contrasted with the suffocating heat of the previous night. The sound of sirens had finally disappeared, replaced by the soft murmuring of officers speaking in low voices. William, still standing, watched as the girls were removed from the van, now wrapped in blankets brought by the paramedics. He smelled the scent of fresh coffee in the air, offered by the officers to warm the shaken girls. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves around them, creating a calming sound, as if nature itself was trying to soothe the chaos that had unfolded moments before. One of the girls, the one William had followed, was sitting on an improvised bench next to a paramedic. She looked at William, her eyes tired but relieved. There was something in her gaze that made him feel a wave of both fulfillment and exhaustion at the same time. Approaching slowly, William crouched beside her, the smell of earth and sweat still clinging to his clothes. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the effort. The girl nodded slightly, pulling the blanket tighter around her, but said nothing. A heavy silence lingered between them, filled with unspoken words. One of the officers approached William, breaking the silence. The man with a notepad in hand had the hardened expression of someone who had seen too much in life. "Good work, sir. If it weren't for you, they'd probably be headed to a terrible fate." The officer glanced at the girls and then back at William, offering a firm handshake. "We need your statement." William nodded, still lost in his own thoughts. "Of course," he said quietly as he stood up slowly, feeling every muscle aching from the confrontation. As he walked toward the patrol car, something caught his attention. There was a small movement in the bushes near the van, something that shouldn't have been there. He stopped, his instincts kicking in once again. "Wait, there's someone else," he muttered, turning quickly. The officer followed his gaze, and within seconds, two more officers ran toward the sound. The tension began to rise again, like a rope being stretched to its limit. William watched closely as the officers surrounded the area, their flashlights illuminating every inch of the vegetation. And then he saw it. A third man, the same one who had fled during the chaos, was crouched in the bushes, watching from a distance, waiting for a chance to escape. He was quickly apprehended by the officers, the sound of shouts and the final struggle blending into the peaceful dawn air. He was waiting for an opportunity, William said, feeling a chill run down his spine. They never do this alone. With the last criminal captured, the sense of closure felt more concrete. William finally relaxed his shoulders, feeling the weight of the night begin to lift. The officers began escorting the arrested men to the squad cars, while the girls were safely taken to a local hospital. The cool morning breeze carried the scent of pine and wet earth, bringing a brief relief after the hours of extreme tension. As William watched the police cars pull away, he couldn't help but think about how a simple rest stop had led him to such a dark event. He looked toward the horizon, the sky now beginning to brighten with soft shades of pink and orange. He knew that, despite saving those girls, there was still much he didn't know about that trafficking network. There was something deeper going on, something that couldn't be resolved with just that night. A police officer's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "Sir, we'll take you to the station to finalize everything. Can you follow us?" William simply nodded, his boots crunching the leaves on the ground as he made his way to the squad car. Even though the case was wrapped up here, an unease lingered. He knew this story wasn't over yet. On the way back, the patrol car's radio echoed with updates from other officers. But William wasn't paying much attention. He was lost in thought. What if I hadn't noticed that girl? What if no one had done anything? These questions pounded in his mind, blending with the distant hum of the car's engine. By the time they arrived at the station, the sun was already high in the sky, and the exhaustion finally hit him. As he waited to give his statement, William leaned back in the lobby chair, closing his eyes for a moment. The smell of bitter coffee filled the air, and he finally felt the weight of the adrenaline leaving him. But even with the momentary relief, he knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. This network is bigger than they think, he thought to himself. William's serious expression reflected the certainty that, although this chapter had come to an end, the fight was far from over. Conclusion: the tension of the night finally came to an end, but the scars left on William Johnson's mind run deep. What started as a simple rest stop turned into a silent battle, where each choice could have changed the fate of many lives. William never imagined that his intuition and courage would lead him to face something so dark, but he didn't hesitate to follow his instincts. The rescue of the girls brought relief, but it also left unsettling questions. How far does human evil reach? How many lives are still trapped in the clutches of networks operating in the shadows, away from everyone's eyes? And above all, what happens when silent heroes like William aren't there to make a difference? As you reflect on this story filled with twists and turns, think about how often we ignore the signs around us. Have we, at some point, failed to notice someone silently asking for help? Are we capable of acting in critical moments, even when we don't have all the answers? If this story made you think, leave your comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for more impactful stories like this one. William's journey may have ended here, but the lessons he left us with continue.